Well, speaking
That's why I'm
of
late.
suckers for gimmicks, it looked like Tamra took her shot. I believe you actually went voting this morning. Welcome to the Trump Report. I am Christian Bladt, as always, joined by Tamra Brown and,
Did you mean
of
to say
course,
take your
Scott
shot in
Moore.
reference to
We believe our...
Hamilton?
Yeah, I saw it one time. It was all right. But I saw it at the Pantages, actually. And I assume that that's why you have that button, right? Because you voted at the Pantages, which is the theater in Los Angeles that was planning on showing Hamilton. I think right now it would be there, but it'll come back. Yeah, so since Tamra, you're our person on the street, you were just there. What was voting like in Hollywood on Friday around 10 a.m. ish?
So today is the day that the polls opened across LA County, and the great thing about LA County is that you no longer have your specific polling place. You can go literally anywhere. I seriously considered going to Catalina Island to vote at the casino on Catalina Island, because that was one of the options.
Well, I know what I'm doing next year.
But so I heard that the Pantages, because I couldn't decide. I'm a tour guide in Hollywood. I'm very into Los Angeles history and everything. So I was just given a buffet of options that I was like, oh, which one should I go to? But I heard that at the Pantages they were doing special Pantages specific I voted stickers, and I'm a sucker for a gimmick. So I was like, all right, that's where I'm going. So they opened it.
Go ahead.
So they opened at 10 a.m. And so it was a bit of a crunch. I was like, okay, if I get in line early, I can probably get through and still get home by 11. And it all worked out, and everybody was in a great mood. The poll workers were so nice, a lot of camaraderie in line, waiting with people, and it was great.
Did they have those plastic like welder's mask shields? Like, what was the level of the sort of the cleanliness approach?
So they had distance markers on the floor everywhere, like in line. Once you were inside, everything was distanced. Everybody, workers and people, you weren't allowed in without a mask. So everybody had a face mask on. Some of the poll workers had an additional shield, but most of them just had the mask. And there was also sanitizer on every single table.
Okay. So I think that that's what you want to hear, and you hope that Go ahead.
They offered you gloves because with our voting system, it's all touch screen. So they offered you gloves, but they said you don't have to take them. But they do have the poll workers. As soon as somebody left one of the booths, one of the poll workers came down and wiped where you just were, wiped it all down.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I hope that the reports around the country are that level of dedication to making sure that everybody's clean, and I think whoever they're voting for, they shouldn't be risking their life to do it. So I think that I think that would I don't know. I think that that's all great to hear, and I'm sure that. When you post or when you TikTok that button, people are going to be very jealous of that, because not that many people are going to have that one. So anyway, and our friend Drexel will be joining us in a little bit. He messaged me that he'll be logging in a little bit. I want to start with there's so many different places to start, but I've figured out, I think, I figured out some ways to share my screen. And only from really working last night, testing things out with Tamra, that I figured out how to do it. But there was this interesting tweet from President Trump, which I think might not be up anymore, because I couldn't find it on his account. I found it in this Mediaite link. And he sent this, I guess he sent this before midnight. If Sleepy Joe Biden is actually elected president, the 4 justices plus 1 that helped make such a ridiculous win possible would be relegated to sitting on not only a heavily packed court, but probably a revolving court as well, at least the many new justices on the radical left. So the thing that I'm bringing this one up for is he's essentially saying that if he doesn't win, it would be because of the Supreme Court. And I think that there's been a little bit of an about face for what he's talking about, because you also see that there is this story. This is from The Hill, that he's changed his election night plans. He's canceled the party at the Trump International. It's going to be at the White House now. Now, I can see that a couple of different ways, though, and of course, there's a pop-up ad as soon as I share my screen. There's a couple of ways to interpret that one. To me, I think that it's, yeah, maybe he's getting an indication that maybe it's not going to be a great night, but I also think he's just being cheap, and he's just like, well, why should I use my hotel for free when I can use the White House for free? And you're definitely having him say more things in terms of, it's reminiscent of a great SNL debate sketch from 1988, where Dana Carvey is George H.W. Bush and John Lovitz was Michael Dukakis. And at one point, Lovitz just looks in the camera and he says, "I can't believe I'm losing to this guy." And that's really what Trump's, what he's having to contend with is the idea that if he doesn't win, it's to this guy. And I think that, I don't know. Let me ask you first, Scott, are you seeing anything different in the president's demeanor, that it's not all rainbows and smiles like it seemed even a week ago?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is just seeing those unhinged, I think it's 3 a.m, tweets that he was sending out last night. And his time. And I thought, okay, this is definitely not someone that's feeling confident about where they're at, no matter what he says. And you've started to notice it in some of the other things too. Some of the surrogates, some of the people are saying things that do lend itself to believe that they know that they are clearly behind right now. And I mean, because they can see the polls and they see the huge surge in early voting, especially in a lot of these heavily Democratic areas. So yeah, I do believe that they are looking at that. And you could take it two ways too, like you said, being at the White House. Is that something where then he feels he can go triumphantly out on the Truman balcony if he wins on November 3rd, or to call out and say, "Well, I won Pennsylvania because I'm ahead there on the night of November 3rd." I don't know. You could play it both ways, or you could say that way they can just sort of slink out without having to be out and have the media see him enter or exit, the Trump hotel or anything like that. So you could take it a couple different ways, because if you're going to be at the White House and you're not going to be around supporters, is that because you're concerned that you're not going to win and you don't want to be around people or have people waiting for you? So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And I know yesterday they were saying they didn't know where he was going to be, which also at that point I was thinking, okay, they're not feeling as confident anymore about that as well, if they're making those type of decisions. So yeah, it's quite clear that they know that they're, in the way their tone is and the way that they're sending out certain messaging, it definitely does lend itself that they know that they're, yeah.
Tamra, what we're hearing a lot and seeing a lot of is, look how big these rallies are. And, President Trump has said that Joe Biden gets about 8 people to show up for him. And then sort of the anecdotal evidence you'll hear is that they definitely cap any of these events that Biden does with President Trump. We heard the story earlier this week of people who got stranded in the freezing cold airfield in Nebraska. And I'm just going to have to say that, does anybody think that is going to cost him 0 votes? Or are there going to be people who are like, I can't believe this guy didn't get me a bus back to my car? So, you're hearing about the size, and people will say that represents enthusiasm. What do you think when you see the size of these events that President Trump is holding? I mean, some of them, like 20,000 people on average, 5,000 or 6,000.
I think if Trump's your guy so much that you're going to make the effort to go to one of his rallies to see him in person when there is a pandemic going on in whatever freezing weather it was in Nebraska at the time, if you're already going to cross those 2 hurdles because you got to see your guy, nothing's going to knock you off of that team. Like, it does not matter. He could have punched your mother in the face. You're probably still going to vote for him. So I wonder if him changing his election night location to the White House has something to do with, we know how much official business he's conducted at Trump Properties over the last 4 years, which has, earned however many millions of dollars from taxpayer money for him by having dignitaries stay at Trump Properties and holding official events at Trump Properties. So I just wonder, was he planning to, when it was going to be at a Trump property, was there a way that he was making money off of it, and then he found out that they wouldn't be making that a big enough profit to make it worth it, so then he moved it to the White House? I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, what do you think, Scott?
No, I don't think so. I think it comes down to, because again, they've never really cared about that. I think it comes down to, are you going to be surrounded by a bunch of supporters and come out, cheering and excited, or are you going to come out and be at home in the White House and try to slink away if the numbers don't look good? So to me, it's more of that reason rather than any kind of money that he's going to get from being there. It's just he doesn't want to be around a bunch of supporters if he has to come out and he's lost.
Right. Joining us now, our friend Drexel Hurd, who had some very distinguished guests over his shoulder. It's very nice to see the former president and the former first lady. I think that's great that they just want to watch you do the show. We appreciate their support. Drexel, we were talking, kind of starting with this story that President Trump has canceled the event at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, and he's planning on having some kind of event at the White House on election night. Just sort of on face value, when you hear that and you hear kind of the tone that he's had more the last few days than even a week ago, what are you hearing from President Trump?
I'm hearing that he probably knows this is his last.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Drexel froze.
Good. Drexel was making an excellent point, and then he froze. Sorry, there you are.
Okay.
You froze for a second. That's all right.
That they do say that my heart is as cold as ice, so it makes sense. But what I was saying was, he knows that he is about to be off of taxpayer dime. Taxpayer resources as much as he can, so he doesn't have to use his own resources.
Yeah, I think that was sort of there was a little, it was a garbled in a minute there. If that, we might, as much as we like seeing you, we might click off your camera if it keeps happening, and we'll just hear you. But we'll see how it goes. And look, our old friend who's been a part of this show for more than 4 years. Right there in the chat, Storage Yard Resident points out Drexel is missing his President Trump picture. So I don't know if that's an accurate assessment of Drexel's office, Storage Yard Resident, but we appreciate literally no one more dedicated to this show than Storage Yard Resident. Which
Biden Harris. There you go.
Yeah, Storage Yard Resident voted already, and his vote was counted. I checked in with him, and Tamra was telling us actually that she voted this morning over at the Pantages. Do you want to show off your button for Drexel? I think because it was at the Pantages, they were giving out these Hamilton I voted buttons.
Button and sticker.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a good place to start, we were talking about sort of the size of the Trump rallies and the amount of them was what I was about to get to. And to some people that translates to enthusiasm. I mean, there are days that, former Vice President Biden doesn't have a rally. Somebody's out there on his behalf, whether it's former President Obama, whether it's Kamala Harris, someone's out there. But what do you think what do you say to someone who's like, but look at how many people are turning out for Trump? That translates enthusiasm. That translates to votes on November 3rd.
Were you asking?
I was asking Drexel.
Okay.
But we can all chime in on
Wait, say the question again. I got distracted for like half a second
That's
trying to
okay.
figure out what
So
was going on.
the size and frequency of the Trump events. You know, he'll hold like 3 in the same state with thousands of people, and people will say, you know, there are definitely you know, people who it fits their narrative will say, look at the enthusiasm for him. That's going to translate into more votes on election day.
Well, look, just because you're loud doesn't make you the majority, right? And I think that we've seen that time and time again. So I don't know that, you know, that, you know, you've already, and people have already voted, early voted. A majority of those are Democrats here in LA County. You know, we have 5 million registered voters. 3 million of those are Democrats, and 1.1 million Democrats have already voted. So I think that is probably what we're going to see a little bit across the country, hopefully, especially in key areas like Georgia and North Carolina, and maybe even Florida. I know there was a Politico article yesterday about where Miami-Dade is sitting right now. But I think that the president thinks that size matters, and in this case, that's pretty much all he has. He talked about it on day one and lied about it on day one. So that's all he actually cares about. And you know, for all the pomp and circumstance that he's got, house is like I said, it all comes down to his own pocketbook. How much out of pocket is he going to have to use? And in this case, how much of the American people's pocketbook is he going to use for himself?
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot to sort of digest right now. But one of the things that I did want to look at, if I can find it while I'm, you know, just juggling here, is there's a fairly decent Twitter account that I follow. This, you know, P polling numbers, because they'll sometimes give context, but usually it's just a bunch of numbers of a lot of polls. And most of them, you'll see stuff like this. It'll say, you know, Biden's up by this much. And then it's a lot of people saying, we're going to save this tweet to hold this pollster accountable. And they do show all of the polls. So they'll show the Trafalgar polls, and there are some other ones. I like, of course, anytime that anybody uses the Marist poll, because that is my alma mater in Poughkeepsie, New York. So the Marist Institute of Public Opinion. And they, you know, so you just sort of scroll through and they'll tell you, you know, some of who these are, and you look at it. I think that probably the easiest way to look is the real Clear Politics average, which a lot of people tend to look at. When you get the glance and you see this and you see all these polls, you know, I mean, obviously, I think it always helps when you see the one or two outliers for President Trump. But I think that, you know, we're seeing that all of that fairly consistently. And I think that, look, there's the argument a lot of the time about, well, they were wrong 4 years ago. But Scott, what are you hearing from pollsters? They all seem to feel pretty confident that, you know, that they're doing things differently this year that will account for some of the mistakes, and also factor in another aspect of this, the amount that Biden is up, and the fact that we're seeing him over 50%, which we didn't in a lot of places for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and as I've said on the show many, many times, the polling really was not that off in 2016. And what we talked about was those late voters that were breaking for Donald Trump in 2016. And this year, you're seeing a bit of the opposite, that the late voters are breaking for Biden. And I was just looking at some polls again this morning, going back to 2016, and they were super close, even in those blue states in the upper Midwest that flipped back to red, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They were basically exactly the same. And like we talked about, it just had tightened a bit, but they had Hillary Clinton up by about a little over 3 nationally, and she basically won just under 3 points. And that was true. She won the popular vote. So they really were not off as much as everyone always says. They just weren't as good at picking up some of those late voters that were breaking towards Trump at the end, and some of those working class, conservative, rural workers that had been Obama voters over the last 2 elections prior that had flipped over. So there was some missing out on a few of those, and obviously in a very close election like 2016, all it took was a few of those to switch over and make a big difference in the upper Midwest, and therefore be able to tip the Electoral College over to Donald Trump. And this year we're not seeing that, and you're absolutely correct. In a lot of these states, we're seeing Biden with over 50%, which also is a good sign for a candidate whenever you have polling numbers over 50%, which means that there's a pretty good likelihood that he will get the majority of those votes. So it's a very big difference this time from 2016, absolutely. And that's why I feel more confident right now. But of course, we still have those lingering anxieties from 2016 to say what could happen at the very end, especially with voters that are leaning towards Republican this year that are going to wait and vote on election day. So.
Well, speaking of anxiety, I always like to check in with Tamra and see where her cautious optimism is. If you had to isolate one or two things, what are the things that you're most nervous about as you see the headlines or the tweets or the TikToks or wherever you're consuming your information? What are you most concerned about?
So this week I posted, so after Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed and she gave a speech, so I posted this TikTok of impression of Amy Coney Barrett giving the confirmation speech that she should have given, thanking Mitch McConnell for pissing all over the Constitution and, saying, so now anti-Trump Republicans have absolutely no reason to vote for him because they got what they wanted and things like this. And granted, TikTok, is a younger platform, so it's left leaning, but there were a significant number of conservative haters on the video, as to be expected. But the thing of it is the crazy comments, like the people saying like all Democrats are baby killers, things like that. I just this week, because of that video, got the overwhelming exposure to the conservative crazy. And even though that is a minority of Republicans, even though, I'd have to say that the people that make statements like all Democrats are baby killers are not the majority of Republicans, it is a significant number of Americans. And that's what's depressing to me. People, the QAnon people, the people that seriously think that Trump is some sort of icon, godsend. He is the reason, God put him here to save America. The people that believe that are a substantial amount of people. And that's what is so depressing. Even though, like we talked about, Drexel talked about last week, how, that arm of the Republican Party is going to be the downfall of the Republican Party, which, I mean, you know more about that than I do, so I'm sure that you're correct. But it just, that arm of the Republican Party is so substantial and significant. It is depressing that there are that many people. So that, because of that, I did start to get a little bit more pessimistic again this week. I am concerned that, like, I 100% believe that Biden will win the popular vote. I would put money on that right now. But I am just worried that it's going to come close enough that it's going to be not even like the last election. I think it might be the kind of thing where there's going to be some sort of manipulation that's going to need to take place. It's going to get to the Supreme Court. The kind of thing where it's just going to be Trump's amazing luck is going to work in his favor once again. And he's going to prevail. Well, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Of what you said, and by the way, anxiety and worry aren't grounded in facts. So you could be given a lot of information that's like, oh, that sounds good, but I'm still worried. But even the guy who runs Trafalgar said that he thinks that Biden will win the popular vote. So, he still has Trump winning because of the work they've done in some states. But so even that guy feels like that's fairly confident. And we have some interesting statistics. last night when I went to bed and I read that Hawaii's early vote was larger than their entire vote. Their early vote as of now is larger than their entire vote in 2016. I thought it was interesting, but I'm like, okay, that's Hawaii. How big is that? But then this morning I wake up and I see that that's Texas. So when you hear that, Drexel, that people have voted in Texas at a number, they voted early at a number greater than people voted overall 4 years ago. Obviously, either party can distill from that what they want, but what does that tell you about people's engagement in this election in particular?
I think that folks are far more engaged.
I think we need to cut his video.
Yeah.
We're not getting anything.
Hey Drexel, if you can click off the camera. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Start over.
Yeah. So what I was saying was, I think that we saw a buildup of excitement when Barack Obama ran in 2008. We saw that fluctuate for 2012. We saw that fluctuate for 2016, but then we saw it spike back up in 2018 after Trump was elected, and it's only going to grow. So, but I think that folks are realizing, especially through this pandemic, that there are a lot more things that are important than a handful of issues that they believe in their head, and that they need to get out there and do what they need to do to vote for the sake of the country. And I think that just in the last 6 months, whether or not it's on economic policy or foreign policy or anything else, we're seeing that this president can't handle that. Now, there are Republicans certainly out there. You could look at those numbers in Texas, like you just showed. 9 million. Maybe half of those are Republicans.
Sure.
Maybe there are voters out there who didn't show up in 2016. I'm just saying, like, there are voters out there, and if you hear them, there are voters out there that are Republican that are voting for Trump that did not come out in 2016 because they didn't think that Hillary was going to win anyway, so they just didn't show up. They're like, Hillary's not going to win. I don't even need to vote. So there are people out there that are still thinking that this election is close on the other side as well, that are trying to get out the vote as well. So, I think it's just going to be really interesting to see. I think for Texans, MJ Hedger is doing really well in Texas. I think John Cornyn has played the cards that he should not have played, and now he's trying to backtrack. And I think Texans are recognizing that. I think Beto has done a really good job of laying the groundwork in Texas from his last Senate run to make sure that more Texans are galvanized to get out the vote as well. So I think that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing those numbers in Texas. Hopefully, a majority of those are Democrats, but I more hope that that they are in the key areas that they need to be in, and not in the places like Austin and Dallas and a few other places where people are going to vote for the Democrat anyway.
What were you going to say, Scott?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Drexel. The good news is, as of now, the majority of those higher vote totals are coming from Hillary Clinton and Beto O'Rourke counties right now. So the Democrats that have been topping, these breaking voting numbers have come from the Democratic-leaning counties. And so that's good news, but also the struggle is how many Republicans are now going to come out on election day and actually vote. Because as we know, today is the last day that you can early vote in Texas. And some locations were open all night last night. They were literally open 24 hours so that voters could stay in and vote until the very end. I think it closes tonight at 7 Central Time. So the good news is those Democratic counties are definitely leading right now. And the Trump counties and the Cruz counties are still behind their numbers. But obviously, as we've seen this election, we've seen more Republicans now wait to vote in person on election day. So it'll be interesting to see that enthusiasm gap and how that changes. And the other great thing is with Harris County, which is home to Houston, it's incredible to see the numbers plus Democratic that have just risen exponentially since 2012. In 2012, Barack Obama won by less than 1,000 votes in Harris County. That's how close it was. By the time we got to 2016, Hillary Clinton won by over 6 figures. It was just under 200,000 votes. And in 2018, Beto O'Rourke won by over 200,000 votes. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the 2020 numbers are going to tell now that we've already surpassed the entire vote in 2016 in Harris County. Are we going to top 300,000 votes for Biden? So it'll be very interesting to see those numbers and how they may actually play out. And the other thing that we also need to consider beyond the Senate race in Texas are those local races again, too, because there's a really good chance that if these numbers stay very high for the Democrats, that they're going to be able to flip the Texas House to the Democrats, which will be huge. And as Democrats, it's very important to focus on those state races and state houses, because now we're going to be moving into being able to reset with the census, the congressional districts, which are going to play a very key factor as we head into the next decade here on where people are going to be able to vote and how the districts are going to be set up. So those state races in a lot of ways are going to be key. So even if somehow we fall short in the national level, just being able to maybe have an influence on those state level races is going to be a huge thing, potentially in Texas and a lot of these other very close battleground states that we didn't have in 2016, like Georgia and Arizona and North Carolina and some of these other places. So it is really exciting to see, but as we'll have to play out on how Election Day really gets enthusiasm with the Republicans there.
Keeping it to Texas, Tamra. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I have a real dummy question. We can't start tallying votes until the 3rd. Is that correct?
Depends on the state, right? There are some, and I believe Texas is one that they have to start that day. But we're talking about counting votes. I'll switch to that. There is obviously a very concerted effort to basically stop voting at midnight stop counting votes on midnight. And traditionally, states have allowed. There's been a period where if it's postmarked on election day or earlier, as long as it comes within about a week, and I think it varies between state, and that's the rules that we've had in place every election until this one. But now they basically the push that they've gone for, which did not actually go the way that I think that the Trump campaign was looking for, which is really in a couple of places in particular, as you see right there, specifically Pennsylvania, North Carolina, they were allowing longer deadlines. And this is in terms of extending deadlines from what they are normal because of the volume of early voting. But what I'm seeing, Tamra, is this idea that they are very actively trying to have us, voters, not be able to have our votes counted within a few days like usual. There's this concerted effort. Is that something that's high up on the anxiety meter when you hear that we wouldn't get the few extra days to count votes?
It is, but what were the two states? Wisconsin was one of them that the Supreme Court actually just surprisingly ruled that they will accept their votes. I mean, that was a shocker.
No, not Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the one that they said they won't.
Okay,
and
it went the other way.
Yeah, it was Pennsylvania and North Carolina that said they will.
Well, yeah, those are. I mean,
I mean, the importance of Pennsylvania isn't lost on I think either campaign, and I think that's why they're so actively working on not counting the votes there. And I mean, I don't know. I think that there's the side to it that yes, the thinking is that Republicans are I guess more likely to vote on election day, but what is their stance going to be if it's like, I don't know, 10:30 Eastern on Tuesday and Biden's way up and they know that there's millions of votes still to be counted, and it's like, oh yeah, we were trying to stop those, and maybe Pennsylvania is not the example because they'll be able to count it, but Wisconsin, it's like, what if Biden's way up and it's like, okay, well, we can't count anymore, so we won't know. And then, maybe somewhere, in like a year or two, somebody will count all those ballots and be like, oh, here's what would have happened, dummy. But I don't know. I mean, I hear that, that's the thing that I don't know. Look, I understand the argument for extending it longer because of COVID concerns. And I think that's a very valid point. But at the very least, you should be able to count these votes as late as you did 4 years ago. If you're not willing to give extra time. And I think that the first, basically the first decision that Amy Coney Barrett was able to make on the Supreme Court was to not rule in that because it was the first day she was there. So her decision was to not decide. And I'm sure that President Trump didn't have any colorful language when that happened, that she decided to not vote on that. Drexel, from your sort of like more official standpoint, obviously I know you're in California, but obviously you hear about all of this. How much is that a concern about all these votes that are going to come in? And I'm not talking about votes that are going to come in December, but votes that might come in on November 6th. I mean, is there a concern about how many of those might possibly get ignored?
Well, every state is different, right? Here in California, we have a 17-day, grace period. So it depends on where they're cut off. In California, we're going to know what the result is going to be that night. It's just going to be so overwhelming that it's not even going to matter, at least at the presidential level. It certainly might. We have a lot of local races, like, our Board of Supervisors race is going to be really close. Our DA's race is going to be really close. A couple of city council races that may be close. But for the most part, as it pertains to the presidential race, I mean, we know where California is going to go. So, and I think we have probably the longest period between November 3rd to canvass out than most states, or at least postmarked by November 3rd and in the receiving of ballots. So I think that if it is close, like Tamra we talked about earlier, that is concerning because especially in key areas, because the president is going to spend that time doing God knows what to try to confuse people. And I think that one thing that I had a question yesterday when I was doing something where, somebody asked me, how do we combat a lot of that? And I said, it's going to take all the secretaries of states to really put out as much accurate information as possible, not just Democrat secretaries of states, but if the Republican secretaries of states truly believe in democracy, they're going to have to combat everything that the president is saying until there's an accurate count of their state. So it's going to take those folks to step up and say, we're not done counting yet. There is no official count yet, and we still have a few more days left before we're going to have some numbers in.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that as you mention it, and Scott, let me know what you think. Just this idea that some of those officials that would decide in states, I mean, the getting more votes will help the down ballot decision making one way or the other. And I don't know that they're going to automatically just assume like, say that like a Secretary of State is on the ballot this year. I don't, depends on the state, whatever, just more hypothetical. And it's like, well, my name's on that ballot. I would like to have more of those counted, please. I think that what President Trump might want doesn't mean it's good for everybody else on the ballot. And I think that there's been, tell me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation of the way that the Supreme Court has looked at these is that they've sort of ruled with earlier state rulings. So that's why the Wisconsin decision is so different than what they decided in Pennsylvania. Yes, do you
correct.
feel like that? Okay, that's the first time that I guessed correctly, that I understood a news story. So thank you. But yeah, so give me your thoughts on kind of all of that, how it's going to vary from state to state, but those down ballot races, how important are those going to be, where they, at some point, they're like, I don't care what President Trump wants.
Yeah, I mean, going to Drexel's point out here in California, we are fortunate that we have a 17-day grace period, so you can be pretty confident that even if you, although I don't recommend it, but if you dropped it off in the mail still, you would be able to feel good that your vote should count with that grace period. But to his point also, it's going to be a blowout for Biden, even bigger at this point than it was for Hillary Clinton in 2016. It's looking at like 36 points or so for Biden to win here in the state, which would be the biggest Democratic victory, I believe, for the state for a presidential candidate. So at that point, you're absolutely right. The minute the polls close, it's going to Joe Biden. But other states, and as you said earlier, Christian, Trump is kind of setting up his own trap here, because if the vote is close in, let's say, Wisconsin, it's closer than everyone thinks, but Biden is leading, and they now have this cutoff on that evening. He's put himself into a corner now by saying everything should be counted on November 3rd. I'm like, okay, well, some of these states are all leading. What if Joe Biden's ahead in Georgia? and Texas and just some of these other states that have been traditionally red. And, Donald Trump's talking about ending it on November 3rd. Well, he's setting himself up into his own trap that I believe he has not really thought about, between now getting all Republicans to vote in person instead of in mail, which was their priority.
So you don't think somebody's pointed that out to him?
No, but that's what I'm saying. I think, that's the problem, is that he's not thinking it through, just like voting in person. What if these Republicans, especially some of these older seniors that might have gone out to vote for him, are now feeling more nervous because of the pandemic and the cases rising, and decide not to go out last minute or drop it in the mail now, and it gets too late and it's not counted, and those are his voters. So he's doing his own self a disservice in a lot of these areas that could spectacularly backfire on him. But I know that he'll come back and be like, no, we should count them, especially if they're in Republican-leaning counties or other areas after, because we know, he'll spin it so whatever is going to work in his favor. But it is definitely working against him right now, and I think it was kind of foolish for him to do this from the get-go, because if every vote counts, you get a lot of overseas ballots from the military, which still tend to lead Republican, even though it's a lot closer now because of his comments. But there's a lot of those that will come in later, and so he's affecting himself in a lot of ways, which is, again, sort of idiotic. But then again, the way he's running these last final days of his campaign have been completely idiotic as well. Just continuing to focus on a very narrow swath of voters that is really not expanding his base in any stretch. And now the economy is not doing great these last few days in his beloved stock market. So he's really not having a good last few days here. So we'll see, how it pans out over the weekend and next week, but not looking good.
Yeah. So Tamra, your question was that you don't think anybody's pointed that out to him. And I think that anybody who points things out to him that he doesn't want to hear, he doesn't listen to, and they probably don't get a chance to talk to him much anymore. But I think as a result of that, he's probably more often told what he does want to hear. But I think that as we've gotten this close, I mean, I was realizing this when I was setting up this live stream for this show and coming up with the title for it. In about 100 hours from right now, this second, we could know who the next president is, or if it's still the same guy. Wow. It's not that far off. So he's close enough to that point where, people that he actually trusts might be telling him things that he's, might finally be telling him things that he doesn't want to hear, So, the fact that he canceled the event, or he rescheduled the event at the Trump International Hotel, I think if he was hearing if people were all being yes men and yes women, but let's be honest, mostly yes men and Ivanka, they would be around him, and he would have probably tried to, rent out the Nationals Park where the Nationals play, to have a larger event, if everybody was telling him what they thought that he wanted to hear. And I think that, there doesn't seem to be a long shelf life for people who tell him things that he doesn't want to hear at the White House level, but then especially in the campaign. Drexel, I asked Tamra before the thing she's most worried about. What do you see that is one of the more encouraging things out there? Is the large early turnout the most encouraging thing, or are you seeing something else out there?
I think it's the turnout of young voters that didn't come out in 2016 that is encouraging. But I think that is a lot of testament to a lot of the fact that we have a lot more younger candidates also running for office, a lot of candidates who are galvanized to support candidates that they believe in at the local level as well. Even Illinois, where Cory Bush unseated the Democratic incumbent at the time, that's another race that people can look to that are energizing folks in certain specific areas, and you're seeing that all across the country. So I think that's encouraging, not only for this election, but hopefully it will be something that we see after this election. Everybody is always so focused on November 3rd, has always been so focused on November 3rd since January 20th of 2017, and so now we have to be thinking past Tuesday and what's next for how we keep people engaged, because we know that Republicans are going to do whatever they can, once they're out of power, to figure out how they can claw their way back into power. And
Yeah,
better ways to
I'm-
cut a lot of fat.
Yeah, I think that I think that's what I don't know. I mean, I think that a lot of that makes sense. Earlier when I was showing some of the different some of the polling numbers, and I showed the Real Clear Politics one. This was one that I wanted to the screen I wanted to show earlier. It's just a collection of what a few of these places are saying, and you're getting.
Mhm.
Things up in the 90s, and obviously the biggest indication for me is usually where the action is from gamblers, and there's the money is not on President Trump. Is that's not, and anybody that's ever gambled on a sporting event, maybe been in Vegas, and you get kind of burned at the last minute. It's the house usually knows which way it's going. So, and look, they're not always right, of course, but it's, you're having a lot of people who are convinced that they're more right this time. And, some of your outliers, as we've talked about in recent weeks, when Rasmussen doesn't have President Trump winning, that's a red flag. And as I said, if Zogby has Biden winning on November 1st, that's the reddest of red flags, or I guess appropriately enough, a blue flag. And one of the, this was something that I think I talked about last week, and clearly somebody at the LA Times must be a fan or viewer of the show, because they had a piece about what I was referring to last week, the shy Biden voters quietly living in Pennsylvania's Trump County. So it's in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. There she is. And, so there's a whole article about that if people are interested. And I think that, I don't know. We basically said a variation on this last week. I think that your pro-Biden people might be a little bit more inclined to keep their head down and be quiet, whereas your pro-Trump people are very often loud. Yes, I could understand them not wanting to tell some stranger on the phone how they're going to vote, And I think that, you're seeing that with those rallies in states, and, in states where, yes, so that's like, okay, so that's 20,000 people who are voting for him there. Except I think Drexel, this was before you came in, the people that were stranded in the airfield in Nebraska, I'm going to bet that they're not all voting for him anymore. I think they're going to probably stay home, some of them. They're like, thanks for literally leaving me out in the cold. That was not lost. That metaphor, Drexel, was not lost on a lot of talking heads about how President Trump literally left his supporters out in the cold just earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's just indicative of how Republicans in this presidency, certainly in their time, in terms of how they govern and how they've governed. You're talking about a party who has had 6 months to pass a relief bill, and then when Mitch McConnell was, so they can get back to campaigning.
Yeah,
back so they could do a Supreme Court justice without passing a relief bill. So look, this is exactly, Donald Trump doesn't actually care about any body in particular.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, I think that you're seeing a lot of that, which is this idea that you couldn't pass a relief bill, but you immediately got another Supreme Court justice confirmed. And, I think that I think that those are the sort of things where, when we were first talking about, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away, there was that conversation we had on this show about, like, it might not be smart to do it right away. They would still, regardless of how the election goes, you still have a lame duck session to do it. You'd still be able to do it in November or December or whatever. So they could still do it, but they feel like they needed to have, an odd number on the court for election day. And I think that a lot of people saw that and were like, what do we care about the Supreme Court? Where's my $1,200 check that I thought I was going to get back in, August or whatever. So, but of course, by the way, Mitch McConnell is of course still polling way up. Like he's like 15 points up the last that I saw. It's not gonna hurt things at home.
No, it's not going to hurt him, but I would say it's also the clearest indication yet that Republicans also know that they're on the brink of losing not just the presidency, but the Senate. And they felt they needed to not only ram that confirmation through, because as Mitch McConnell so wonderfully put it, that the Democrats can undo a lot of the things that the Republicans have done over the past years in the next couple of years as the majority, but it'll be a lot more difficult to change the makeup of the Supreme Court. So it was a very cynical, hypocritical move. But not only were they wanting that full Supreme Court to hopefully, have them deal with any voting issues that come up to hopefully send it the Republicans' direction, but they also clearly know that they're on the losing end right now, and they figured it was more worth it for them to ram a Supreme Court justice through that'll be on there for life and know that they're going to lose. And so they hedged their bets on that, which, will probably, like you said, also help to cement their loss even more. But now they don't care because they know that they can have their majority Supreme Court, and then they can be the opposition party to try to stop or slow down everything the Democrats are going to do. So to them, that was a bigger win. And it was incredibly cynical and hypocritical. And Mitch McConnell, like you said, can do it because he can have no risk of losing in his home state at this point and be a thorn in the side for Democrats as the minority leader. So yes, it was definitely a clear sign yet that they know where they're at.
And I just worry that if Biden does win in the next 3 months until he's actually sworn in, what other sort of just FU down and dirty executive orders are going to get put through by this very petty man who has known that he's lost, and he's just going to do every single FU to the American public until he's forced out of office. That's what I keep worrying about right now also.
I'm worried about what they're going to do with that as well, just the damage they're going to do in those last couple months, and to make it as difficult as possible for an incoming Biden administration. But luckily, executive orders can be overturned. My bigger concern, too, is the fact that all the pardons that he's going to level out, and I wouldn't put it past him to try to pardon himself. So the pardons are the bigger thing for me, and some of those things, because thankfully the executive orders can be overturned on day one of a Biden administration. But yes, definitely the damage they're going to do and the difficulty they're going to leave behind for the incoming administration without helping at all is going to make it a very difficult task for a new administration to come in and try to get things going. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on that, on some of the tactics they'll do.
Yeah, I think we're a far cry from 20 years ago, where I remember the outgoing Bill Clinton administration in 2001 for the incoming George W. Bush. They took the W's off of the keyboards of all the it was sort of like a prank, and you're like, that's obnoxious, but you got us. I feel like it's going to be a much higher level of anything like that on the way out. But of course, the Democrats have to actually win first. Joe Biden has to win. And look, I can understand the skepticism from people, one, who are supporting President Trump because of 4 years ago, and then the people who want to be confident. And there was a lot yesterday going around of telling Nancy Pelosi to shut up because she said that she was very confident that Joe Biden's going to win. And it's like, come on, we're like looking at our election results on a Ouija board, so you just kind of jinxed us, So, I think that everybody's on edge. It's crazy to think about when I did the quick math that it's about somewhere within 100 hours from right now. We could know. It also could be 100 days from now, but not literally, by the way, because I realize what the timetable is. But more. But that's why in our final moment here, I want to go around and ask each of you if you think. And by the way, I'm thinking that we'll do this show Tuesday night, maybe somewhere around 7:30, a little bit before 8:00 Pacific time, because that's usually, they wouldn't call California until after 8:00. So that's what I'm thinking, but we'll tweet out and we'll make sure we figure out what works for everybody. We'll have some people come in and out of the show. Chelsea will come and say hi. Brooke will come and say hi. And Drexel, we know you'll be busy, but if we can get a few minutes from you on election day, that'll be fantastic. So let me ask. Yeah, let me ask each of you. I'll kind of just go clockwise. I'll ask you first, Scott. Do you think Tuesday night, I won't even give you a time. Tuesday night, we'll know who won the presidential election.
You know, I have to say that if the polls are as correct as they are, and we really see things trending Democratic, there could be a very good chance that we will. And the only reason why I say that is because of Florida in particular. Florida and Arizona are allowed to start counting their early voting ballots before November 3rd. So there's a very good chance that we will know pretty solidly who the winner is in those states. And if those states flip Democratic, and especially Florida with 29 electoral votes, then it makes it increasingly hard for Donald Trump to come back. So if the polls are correct, and we do get some of those flips of those states, then yes, I do believe we would be able to say pretty confidently that we will know the winner, and that would be Joe Biden. If it's the other way around and we see things very tight, and they're too close to call in places like Florida and Arizona, and North Carolina, and Georgia, and maybe even Texas, then we may not know with a full certainty that night. So it's really going to depend if they're correct. So if the polls are correct, I would say yes, and it would be Joe Biden.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. The way that I look at it is if somehow what the conservative MO is, this idea of the shy Trump voter, the people who are not impacting the polls, if that narrative is correct, we will know very early, because the states that President Trump needs to win the Electoral College are not in the position. It is not Washington, Oregon, or California. Mm-hmm. So I think somewhere around 9:00 Eastern, you could actually know that, oh my gosh, they were wrong in all of those states. And then it doesn't matter what happens, for those three states. But I'll give my full answer after I let Tamra and Drexel go. Tamra, do you think we'll know for sure something Tuesday night?
My worry, my fear is that Biden will be slowly edging ahead, and then Florida will announce that there's some huge error in their tally. There's been some huge issue. Newsflash, at 6 p.m. Pacific, Florida has had some massive error that they cannot. They have to start recounting from the beginning, or something. Something's going to happen like that. That is going to just be a giant wrench in the progress.
Scott, you're from Florida, so you know a lot of what's going on there. Any chance that they're going retro and bringing back the butterfly ballot for this year, or?
They are not, and I think there's always that possibility, especially with states that are Republican run, to try to make a run at that kind of thing. But I also believe Florida doesn't want to necessarily be the punching bag again after 2000 and some of the other. And we know how close those races always are in Florida, going back to 2018 in the gubernatorial race and the Senate, U.S. Senate race there. But I don't believe that they're going to want to be in that way, and especially if the numbers are a lot higher for one candidate or the other early enough in the evening, because like I said, they start to count early. They don't have to wait until election day. That we will have a pretty good idea of how the numbers are looking. We will see how the Democratic counties are doing with their numbers and some of those Republican counties. So we'll have a good idea. So I'd like to say that I feel more confident that states like Florida and Arizona that can count early. My more concern is in some of those upper Midwest states where they don't start counting until election night, and where there could be some areas where they're going to try to prevent the full numbers getting out, especially when you have a Republican legislature in places like Wisconsin. And as we know, Minnesota, even the judges have stopped voting, for counting mail-in ballots and everything as of 8 p.m. on election night. And we know that Hillary Clinton only won by 1.5 points there in 2016. So technically, if you're counting, and that's different from 2016 as well. So if you're counting those votes and you're cutting it off at 8 p.m. on election night, is there a chance that there's a way of trying to edge out a win for Donald Trump in Minnesota? Possibly, because again, you have a Republican-led Senate. You do have a Democratic governor, but you do have a Republican-led state house and Senate. So I'm more concerned about some of those states that don't start counting until that night.
Michigan will announce an error at 5 p.m. Pacific. There's going to be some massive recount in Minnesota and Michigan.
And Drexel, do you think Tuesday night we'll actually know what's happening?
I think we'll know pointed out. I think that if can you hear me?
Yeah,
you
you're
got cut out
gone for a moment. It goes in and out, but
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Oh, sorry. I think that if we see some, because I think people keep talking about the presidential race and forgetting that there are Senate races that we also need to know the results of that night.
Absolutely.
So if the Senate races to Democrats, we can probably be assured that the presidential might be turning in that way from that particular state. So I think that we could probably infer a little bit of that from what we're going to be able, from what we're going to see.
Yeah, I was reading something that what polling also shows is that you're getting very little split tickets. People voting for Trump that are then voting for Democrats and vice versa. People are basically doing the straight ticket across the board. So yeah, I think that'll be a big indication. I feel pretty confident that we'll have a really good idea by the time we do this show. Whenever we do it, I'm thinking, like I said, around 7:30 Pacific time. If something crazy is happening, we might scramble, try and get on a little earlier. But just stay tuned. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, the Blackcast YouTube channel, and you'll just get the show whenever it happens. What I'm hoping is that we don't have to come back later in the night and be like, oh, we were wrong, everything we just talked about, that sort of thing. Because 4 years ago, we actually had to wait and come back the next night because AfterBuzz had to close. Scott was coloring in the map, and we were
a lot of red.
It was you were just like, wait, I only have this little red marker. I didn't think I was going to need so much of it. But I think that if Joe Biden wins, he's going to win by a lot. And if he doesn't, it's what I was just talking about before. The Trump voters that are just like, that they don't want to tell people about it, that they're, and we'll have to see. But
that's also the same. But that's also the same for secretive Biden voters. I mean, there's an article that just came out in the Times today, or the LA Times, one of the two, and literally talked about the shy Biden voter.
So it's in the LA Times today, exactly. Look, I think that people in general are less inclined to want to talk about how they're voting. And that was definitely something that I found interesting. And yeah, I think that the only way that President Trump wins is if there are so many of those people, and that they're just like, they're not the ones at the rallies. They're not the ones with the MAGA hats. They don't have the flag flapping on the back of their pickup, which, believe it or not, I saw in Burbank, the Trump flag flapping around. Every once in a while, you'll see one. But so I don't know. I feel like it is a very decisive moment. But as always, we have just a handful of states that are going to really determine everything. But we will be back on Tuesday, in somewhere in that 100-hour window that I'm talking about. 7:30 Pacific sounds like the right time for me. There'll be a lot less guesswork at that point. I think we're going to have a really good idea. But you know what? I wouldn't be shocked if it's the end of the night and we're like, yeah, here's what we think's happening, but we don't really know. If neither one of them gives a speech on Tuesday night, I'm not surprised. Although actually Trump will give a speech no matter what. And I think I used this metaphor last week, but I'll always use it from Citizen Kane when he's running for governor. He runs a newspaper. There's two covers. There's one that says that Kane wins, and then the other one says fraud at the polls. There's no other narrative for the Trump campaign. Either he wins or he was it was stolen from him. So he will speak out on one of those two topics on Tuesday night, I think.
But to be fair, maybe not Biden, but Democrats will be saying the same thing. Should Trump win? I mean, we know it's because of fraud also.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it would take a while for you to see actual voter totals. If President Trump wins by enormous margins like he did not in 2016, then, it's because those margins were so slim in 2016, it's very easy to understand the narrative of, what happened in, one county in one of those states, so I'm excited, but I'll be relieved when it's over. whenever that is. But we'll be back then.
I just
Trent.
want to say just real quick. So I just got I get a report every day of how many voters have voted in LA County. In 2016, 3.5 million people voted in LA County. As of right now, 2 million people have already voted in LA County. So that's 36% of the 5 million eligible voters in LA County. So, it's going to be massive. And of that, 1.2 million of those voters are Democrats. So,
and that vote total counts Tamra's vote from earlier today. So that
is it that fast?
Probably not.
No, this is from yesterday. This is the report
yesterday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because the polling in person opened today at 10 a.m. So it's already much higher than what Drexel just said.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, that's interesting. And, look, like I said earlier in this show, the Texas number is crazy to me, that more people have already voted than did 4 years ago. But we will see. Drexel, if you want to tell people where they can keep in touch with you, anything you want to promote, please do that. And then click back on your camera as you wave goodbye, because we want everyone to see you.
You can find me at Drexel Hurd. The only thing I have to promote is the vote. So make sure that you vote. Promote the vote. That's all I know.
Right.
Super corny, but that's all I know.
And Scott, where do people find you?
At Twitter at sman80. That's SMN80. And yes, I have to say, vote, 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 vote.
And I've put on my University of Virginia Center for Politics that I got for free. I showed this on the show a couple months ago. Vote on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home. What I do like about this is that you can actually perceive this as a nonpartisan mask. So I didn't vote in person. I did wear it to the ballot box. But the fact that Dr. Larry Sabato was giving these away, it's always nice. He's a good follow, especially in these crazy times. Yes. I've started following a lot of people that I hope to unfollow November 4th. He's somebody I'll always follow. Right. Tamra, where do people find you?
That's like the Bonin flip-flops on the west side that I really wanted, but they only had a limited number of those. Find me on TikTok at Hey Tamra and vote, 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 vote.
And of course, what if they want to vote for Kanye?
There was a homeless man outside of the Pantages yelling at people to vote for Kanye, and the polling people were like,
top of the ballot.
I know.
Yeah,
and they were like, "Can you go to the end of the block because you can't stand right in front of here?
You have to be like 100 yards away or whatever it is, 100 feet." Yeah. And of course, if you are enjoying this conversation, make sure you subscribe here on the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. You'll see it right there. Although I guess people are on Twitch and also on Facebook, but the Blackcast YouTube channel, subscribe. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ, and on the Blackcast YouTube channel in a little bit less than 3 hours at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 Eastern. We'll be doing the Star Trek Discovery After Show, speaking about Season 3, Episode 3, and then at 9 p.m. tonight, the Mandalorian second season premiere here on the Blackcast channel. We'll talk about that. So if you want to nerd out about polls, you have this show. You want to nerd out about nerd stuff, you watch the other shows. But that's where you can find all of that. And we'll need Drexel to catch up before the end of Discovery, because we'll be able to drag you in over there. But anyway, thanks to everyone. Thanks to Storage Yard Resident for always being in the chat. And of course, as we said enough times, go vote. We'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.